Well, Manchester City head into this weekend's FA Cup final against Crystal Palace in a little bit of a difficult moment. They put in a lifeless performance against Southampton at the weekend, and that was after Erling Haaland questioned the team's hunger in an interview with ESPN.
Ups and downs are normal. It is football, of course, and the Premier League is so competitive. But would you put it down to what felt different, I suppose, a little bit this season?
Of course, you can find excuses and all of this, injuries, many injuries, bad timings and all of this. But in the end, we haven't been performing well enough. We haven't had the fully hunger inside of us, and it's not. I haven't been good enough. I haven't helped the team enough, and in the end, we haven't been good enough. Winning games in a row, and that's what we need to do. We have to get better, and we have to get ready for first now. Think of the next game, finish strong in the Premier League and win the FA Cup, and then we have to start focusing on the next season straight away.
Well, it's interesting that you say that about the hunger, because that's something a couple of the other players said as well. Is that just a natural thing that we on the outside need to understand when you perform at such a high level and win constantly, that it's natural to experience a little dip?
I think so. You cannot win every year. And again, what I just said, the club has set the standard, so the bar so high that this season is a catastrophic season. That just says it all. Next season we have to find something inside our stomach again to attack the season.
Rob, what is going on at City at the moment? Do we read more into Southampton 0, Man City 0 than maybe we should, or is there a little bit of an issue behind the scenes maybe?
No, I think the sense I get at City is that they're just desperately trying to get to the end of the season, because
it's 2 months away.
Well, yeah, because it's been miserable. There's no point in any positive spin on it. I mean, all the interviews before the FA Cup semi-final and the final have been: is the FA Cup going to save your season? Is qualifying for the Champions League going to save it? And every time, everyone said no. Players, Guardiola, everyone. You can even see a little bit in Pep's tactics. He started to play this kind of like this box midfield, which obviously he doesn't really want to do, but he's trying to get more control just to see them through to the end of the season, get into the Champions League, hopefully win the FA Cup, get to the summer, well, after the Club World Cup, obviously, get to the summer, sign some players, hopefully get some players back fit and start again next season. That's the sense I get, that they're just really just limping towards the end of the season. It's just a season that everyone wants to forget as quickly as possible.
I think as well, the Ruben Dias quotes after the game at Southampton, which I thought were ridiculous. When he basically blamed Southampton for the way they played and said it's not good for the show and teams shouldn't play like this. Well, I think that kind of exposed a bit of the tensions at City as well, because Dias is basically saying that they didn't beat the worst team in the Premier League this season because they defended. Well, you're Man City. You should be finding a way to beat them.
Well, I think the argument was they didn't play football. Well, the point is that they can't play football. They're bottom of the league.
Yeah, but he's a defender. He should actually acknowledge the value of defending well, and they defended, and he's blaming the pitch. And I think looking for all these excuses is a way of deflecting the blame from themselves that they haven't performed.
I think the Haaland quote is interesting, because all season Pep has been asked about why has it gone wrong, what's happened, and he's talked about injuries, he's talked about players having dips in form, Phil Foden, Bernardo Silva, all of these kind of factors that have impacted the form. The one thing that he's refused to say really is that the players have lost their hunger and desire and motivation. Now, we spoke to Gundogan before the FA Cup semi-final, and he suggested that maybe that the kind of the fight and the desire had been missing a little bit. And obviously Erling has come out and said it flat out. When it was put to Pep in his press conference, Guardiola seemed a little bit annoyed at that. He kind of like took a little minute to answer and sort of said, well, if the players feel like that, then they need to go and speak about it themselves and sort it out in the dressing room, as if to say, that's a major problem. That's not a problem that I've noticed, but if they think that, they need to solve it. He looked really irked.
I don't think it's a hunger thing. I just think, look, I mean, over the years, you've had the great teams, the Liverpool team in the 80s, the Man United team under Ferguson, who won 3 successive titles twice. Eventually it comes to an end, doesn't it? You can't keep going to the top of the mountain. City done it 4 times now, the 4 times the league title on the row, and that's never been done before. I just think they've come to an inevitable point where they just haven't got any more to give. They need a season to reset, and also they're quite an old team. Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, John Stones, who never plays, Kevin De Bruyne. There's lots of players in that team who are at the wrong side of 30 who, let's be honest, have given incredible service to City over the years. And maybe they just haven't got any more to give. Maybe they've come to the end of the road, and Pep hasn't noticed it. Pep hasn't dealt with it, because I think the last 2 summer windows, they've kind of taken the foot off the gas. And Pep and Chiki Beguristain, the director of football, maybe it's their fault. Maybe they haven't changed when they had to. Maybe Pep was too loyal to the treble-winning team. And it's not the players' fault. It's Pep
I
hadn't
think that's what it is.
refreshed at the right time.
The loyalty to the treble-winning team, that he was loyal to them in the summer when he could have refreshed and signed younger players. When it was going really poorly in December and January, he could have dropped a few of those older players. And I think he thought in his head, these are players have got me out of trouble in the past. They're going to do it again. And they haven't. And just recently, he started to play Nico O'Reilly a bit more, James McAtee a bit more. And he actually said in press conferences that he should have done that earlier, that maybe he was too loyal to the players who have won so much for him. And he couldn't get out of his head that these players were just not performing or couldn't reach the levels that they'd done so often again and again and again. They just couldn't he was a bit blinkered, I think, when he looked at the likes of Foden, Bernardo, Kyle Walker before he left, Edison to a certain extent. That he just didn't want to make those changes. And it's only been lately that he's kind of realised that he should have kind of blooded a few of those youngsters a bit earlier, probably.
Thing is, when someone like Erling Haaland, or when any player, I guess, comes out and says, that there is an issue with motivation or with hunger, he's got someone in mind. Now, he's never going to say who it is, but he's clearly got 1, 2, 3, maybe more players in mind. So is that dressing room broken? Is there an issue there that, we've seen when Pep's fallen out with a player in the past, he's been very quick to move them on. I mean, are we facing a situation where he's got to pick his battles here and maybe get a number of them out this summer?
I think there's a bit of uncertainty, and I don't think that's helped just in the season in general. I mean, Kyle Walker starts the season as club captain, and by January he's gone, he's out of the team, and then he has to go. You've got the whole issue with De Bruyne and his contract. They start contract talks with De Bruyne in September, he gets injured, they go on the back burner, he comes back, there's no talks, he gets sort of March time and he's thinking, well, I'm going to have to move, I really want to stay. But he's getting moved on by the club, then he kind of comes back, plays really well, and people are starting to talk about maybe possible use. I mean, all of these little kind of things just haven't helped City and haven't helped Pep. And then you've got issues beyond that with the likes of Gundogan. I mean, Gundogan hasn't had a great season. I think City just assumed that he would come back from Barcelona and slot straight back in. And for whatever reason, it took him 6 months to get up to speed. Bernardo Silva just hasn't looked like the same player in terms of, his energy and the distances he covers sort of on the pitch. So there's all these little issues that now you're going to have to solve in the summer, and it's going to be tricky because essentially you're breaking up a dressing room that's been together for 7, 8 years. It's really, really tough to start saying, well, you guys aren't going to do it for us anymore.
There's also big players in the dressing room, popular players in the dressing room, which Pep hasn't handled very well this year. Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne. These are players that are the glue of that dressing room, aren't they? They're the senior guys that have always kind of delivered when City's been big. There's been a problem with Edison from, 18 months ago? Edison wanted to go last summer, didn't go, and he's not been happy all season. So there's a lot of players now, a lot of Pep's big players, who've got their own reasons to be unhappy. Foden has had a terrible season. It's not been managed particularly well by Pep, I don't think, this year. Grealish has been, I feel sorry for Grealish. I think Grealish has been crushed by Pep. That when Jack Grealish signed for Man City, he had a great couple of years initially, but he was a flair player, he would take people on, he gave that kind of X factor to City. He's turned into a robot now. And you can see when Grealish plays, the very rare times that he does play, he's almost like inhibited by, he's looking over his shoulder, what will Pep say if I try and take this man on? So I think Pep over time, I'm told that he's a very hard manager to play for. Yes, he'll win trophies, but he's so demanding that it can be quite tiring for players. All these players they've won everything under Pep, so they are now experienced enough and mature enough to actually say, well, hang on a minute, to push back in many ways, or to think, I'm not going to run through that brick wall again because I've done it so many times and I get nothing for it. So I just think it's a general, not malaise. I mean, Pep's still Pep, but I think not enough people are looking at Pep. They're looking at the players, but Pep is the guy that gets all the praise when they win. So maybe he deserves a bit more scrutiny when they don't win, because the genius that he is, when things go wrong for Pep's teams in seasons that we've seen in the past, they tend to go wrong quite badly.
All right, well, given all that, are they still favourites in the FA Cup final on Saturday, or are they still a team that can put all of that to one side when there's a prize in view?
2 months ago, I would have said no, they weren't favourites, but I think they've kind of rediscovered a little bit of their form over the last sort of, since the March international break, really. They've looked more stable. I know some of the results haven't been great, but they've gone 10 unbeaten.
Without Haaland, they've looked a better team in terms of the way they play, they're more fluid.
Well, I was just about to say, I mentioned there how Pep started to play that box midfield with 4 midfielders and then kind of these split strikers. You can't do that with Erling Haaland, really. He's done it with Marmoush on one side and Savinho on the other. Now, you can't not play Haaland because he's your main goal scorer, so he has to start at Wembley. But there will be a part of Pep, I imagine, who thinks, well, the way that we've got back on track is to get more control of games. The way I've done that is to have these 4 midfielders with no centre forward essentially. So is there a case to not start with Haaland against Palace? Now that's a massive call in a massive game, in a game really you have to win, because obviously the FA Cup puts a different spin on the entire season. It would be a massive call, but I imagine there's part of Pep that thinks, no, I quite like to play my 4 midfielders still and split strikers and have a bit more control, particularly with the way that Palace play. Who are just going to want to play on the break all the time.
That would be a huge call. Haaland wasn't good against Southampton. The worst team in the Premier League with a terrible defence. He barely had a kick. But to drop Erling Haaland after giving him... That is...
I don't think he will, but it's a possibility, certainly. I don't think it's a dead cert that he starts on Saturday at Wembley.
I mean, I think we should take a moment to talk about Oliver Glasner, the job he's done at Palace, and just how good they are. I mean, I remember I saw him the other week before the semi-final when they played at Arsenal, when everybody saw they're going to roll over here 3 or 4 because the big game at Wembley was on the horizon. They were the better team.
They're a good team.
And they'd rested several players. But they look. We've talked about Ruben Amorim struggling with a sort of 3-4-2-1, 3-4-3 system. This is a team that's doing it in the Premier League week in, week out. Obviously, they've had longer to work on it. But, I mean, how much of a surprise have they been this season for you?
They started the season quite slow, didn't they, Palace? They had a tricky start, but they've been outstanding, and I've seen them a few times, and they are a really good team to watch. And you asked before who's the favourites. I think City are the favourites, but I think Palace will win. I just think Palace have got the energy, the belief, the ambition to take City on. I don't think they're frightened of City. I think that, and people at Eberechi Eze is probably the best player in the league in the last month, hasn't he? He's a sensational player. Mateta's looked great forward up front as well. I think Palace have got the game, and also Glasner's a big game manager. He won the Europa League with Eintracht Frankfurt 3 years ago against Rangers. He knows what it takes, and a lot of people are talking about what will Tottenham do if Ange goes, and they're talking about Iraola. I think Oliver Glasner's a much better bet. I think Glasner's got all the credentials to take on a top club like Tottenham. But if he wins the FA Cup with Crystal Palace, he might think that Palace is a better bet. But Palace is a very good manager, Glasner.
I was at that semi-final against Villa, and Villa had obviously just come off the back of that Champions League again against PSG, where they got the better of them really at Villa Park for the majority of that game. And Palace were absolutely unbelievable. They absolutely battered Villa, and it could have been about 6-0. Eze was terrific. Wharton in midfield, he's unbelievable for a midfielder of his age.
Great at the back. They've got a very good spine, haven't they?
They're organised, like they're compact when they defend. They know exactly what they're doing on the break. They play. They're not embarrassed about playing on in transition. The way they move, the runs that they make when the ball breaks. It's just everything is so organised. And Glasner's just he just feels like he's this really calming influence on the touchline. And even he comes into his press conference afterwards, and obviously, getting Palace to an FA Cup final is massive. I know they've done it in 1990 and 2016, but to get a club like Palace to an FA Cup final is huge. And there was no kind of, I don't know, he just sat there and he looked so calm, as if it was just normal. And I just thought, it's incredible that for a manager to come to the Premier League and to perform as he has done with a team like that.
I think they'll win it, because I just got a feeling it's their time. I think they've had 2 cup finals in the past where they've lost, on both occasions, really unluckily, to Man United. I think this time, I just think they've got the better team now, Palace, than they've had before. I think the fans as well. The fans will want it. It sounds ridiculous, the fans will want it more than Man City fans. I think the Man City fans, it's just another game, another possible silverware to a bad season. I think the Palace fans are so desperate they will make it an occasion. I just think Palace have got the momentum for this.
You're both going to be there at Wembley. What are your favourite FA Cup memories? FA Cup final memories, I should say.
The one that sticks out, it's another City one, is when they were beaten by Wigan. Because I've never known a day that appeared to be so one-sided and then was so one-sided the other way. I can remember being in the car on the way to Wembley and listening to the radio, and they were interviewing Wigan fans outside, and I can remember one Wigan fan saying, I hope it's not 8-0. I hope we don't lose 8-0. Anything other than 8-0, that'll be fine. I'll take 5-0. And I thought, that's a really weird way to approach a final, but I can kind of understand it, because you're about to get relegated from the Premier League. And then when the game started, it wasn't a smash and grab. They just absolutely battered City. McManaman just running all over Pablo Zabaleta, and then the goal, when it came, was almost like it was meant to happen. It was just such a strange day, and obviously did for Mancini in the end.
I've got a story about that day. You might know this one, Rob, but this isn't my favourite memory. I'll come to that in a minute. But basically, Roberto Mancini was 24 hours from being sacked by Man City. I mean, we all knew on the day of the game he was being sacked. And by that point, his relationship with everyone at the club had just gone absolutely through the floor. He was he was probably the most unpopular manager of any club I've ever dealt with. I mean, I love Mancini. I thought it was great. He was great for us, but the people who worked at the club just couldn't stand him. And if you remember that day, it rained all day, and City lost, and Mancini had been on the touchline all day in his raincoat. So before he went to his media press conference, he basically told one of his staff to get the hairdryer out to dry his coat. They were drying his coat in the dressing room before he came to do the press conference. He did his press conference, went to a little side room, and then obliterated one of his staff. Just horrendous dressing down in front of the media. And then he went, and the next day was Fergie's last game at Old Trafford, and on the way up to drive to Old Trafford, Mancini was sacked. It was a busy day. Fergie quits and Mancini gets sacked. But my memory of the FA Cup final, so this is kind of giving my age away a little bit here. My first FA Cup final at work was 95, Man United v Everton. I was just a young kid at the time, and Wembley in those days was a different scenario to now, because obviously we've done games at Wembley or big games, and you basically, your access these days is so limited. You basically go to the press box, you go to the press room, and you don't really get much access. But back then it was, after the game, you had to, this was when the old dressing rooms were in the tunnel area behind the pitch, so you had to basically walk from the press box down to the tunnel. And I remember I walked down the main stand at Wembley onto the dirt track, and I was able to walk onto the pitch. So I'm walking on the pitch at Wembley. I'm actually in the 6-yard box where Paul Rideout scored the goal, and I'm thinking, you're thinking this is where Jeff Hurst scored the goal that won England the World Cup back in '66. I'm thinking, I'm stood on the pitch at Wembley in the goal mouth, and I carried on walking down the tunnel, and I'm walking down the tunnel waiting for the players to come out. Eric Cantona stood outside the door because he was suspended at the time, so he couldn't play in the final. He was stood there with a face like thunder. I was a bit kind of intimidated by it a little bit, thinking I can't go too close to Eric. But it was thinking how much more accessible the game was back in those days, that you could actually walk on the pitch at Wembley and then walk down the tunnel and basically...
I've actually scored a hat-trick at Wembley for that very reason. After an autoglass windscreen final that Stockport lost, my dad was club doctor, and one of the players had broken his arm in the second half and had to go to hospital. And he was meant to take me to the team hotel afterwards, and they made me wait on the benches at Wembley for him to come back. And to pass the time, the kit man gave me a ball and said, just go and kick it about on the pitch. So I became the youngest ever person to score a hat-trick at Wembley.
How old were you?
About 8.
Wow.
A record that will never be beaten, presumably.
But the cup final is a great day. I mean, obviously you've been to plenty of cup finals as well.
Just in terms of access, I guess the one that's sort of will always stick in my mind is it was the COVID year, because it was just never has the distance been so great between the sense of occasion and the actual atmosphere in the stadium. I mean, as you talk about, the distance that we have with the executives and the players and everything else, and on that day we were walking in. I remember walking in with Arsenal's chief executive to the ground. All right, cup final,
Got your mask on.
Masks, distance, 2 meters, please stay away. And there were only, I can't remember exactly, I think there was only sort of 30 odd media allowed in. And then obviously the two squads and the support staff and everybody. And Aubameyang scores what turns out to be the winning goal. And you just sort of automatically think there's going to be this big Wembley roar, and it's just sort of 40 odd people going, way. It's just it was such a surreal day, because, and then they go and get the FA Cup, and you're like, wow, how are they getting the FA Cup when this is just a game being played in, admittedly, a very nice, but basically a park game with no one there. It's just a surreal thing.
Just one not to Palace. Were you there in 2016 when Alan Pardew did his dance?
I was.
That was a memory I'll never forget. But hopefully Crystal Palace
fans will have a
happier day this weekend.
On the dance floor?
Yeah. Maybe Oliver Glasner.
I'm not letting you get out of this.
Maybe Oliver Glasner will be doing it at the weekend in front of Pep Guardiola. We'll see.